This is the Everyone's Agnostic podcast with Marie Delafont and Cass Midgley.
We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in two easy ways. You can pledge
$1 million
or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast, or leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 227 of the Everyone's Agnostic podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. I'm going to die. A big thanks to each and every one of our Patreon and PayPal supporters. Our guest today is Bonnie from episode 162. And if you remember that episode, she is a force to be reckoned with and a super creative being. She wanted to talk about the effect that Christianity has on climate change, among other things. Also, my new co-host and manager, Marie Delafont, and I discuss if she's just my token female or if she can call me out on my shit. It gets pretty real in both conversations. Robert Ingersoll wrote, quote, "The man who does not do his own thinking is a slave and is a traitor to himself and to his fellow men," unquote. Consider this phrase, my perception is my reality. First, let me say that this is true. It's true for the individual, maybe also true for people groups or even nations. Disagreements, even wars, can be caused by different perceptions that create different realities. The parable of the blind men and the elephant places a group of blind men engaging an elephant for the first time. They each touch a different part of the elephant's body, such as the leg, the ear, trunk, or tusk, only. They then describe the elephant based on their perception. When they each hear the other's perception, they presume they are lying, they insist on being right, and it comes to blows. The moral of the parable is that humans have a tendency to claim absolute truth based on their limited, subjective perception, as they ignore other people's limited, subjective perceptions, which may be equally true as theirs. So while your perception is your reality, it is not necessarily the whole picture. It doesn't mean you're wrong, and it doesn't mean that the differing positions aren't also right. When perceptions become mutually exclusive, the opposing parties may be in denial and insist on the rightness of their narrow view. Convincing them otherwise can be extremely difficult, if not impossible. We form a bias around a perception and often don't want to be bothered with the facts. Humans once believed that the earth was flat. It must be. Look at it. We thought the sun and stars circled the earth because it looked that way. Galileo was ordered to turn himself into the Holy Office to begin trial for holding the belief that the earth revolves around the sun, which was deemed heretical by the Catholic Church. Galileo agreed not to teach the heresy anymore and spent the rest of his life under house arrest. One social research study examined a pool of people's opinions about federal welfare programs. The researchers found that the majority of people were highly misinformed about the nature and scope of these programs, and that the people who were the least informed about them generally expressed the highest degree of confidence in their knowledge. Furthermore, the researchers found that presenting people with facts about these welfare programs did little to change people's opinion about them. However, in a follow-up study, the researchers discovered that tweaking the way they presented the facts made people respond more positively to the new evidence. In this follow-up, people were first asked to estimate the percentage of the national budget that is allocated towards welfare. Then they were also asked what percent of the budget they believed should be spent on welfare. Posing these questions back to back, led participants to contrast their perception of reality with their preferred level of spending before they were told what portion of the budget is spent on welfare in reality. This meant that most of them had to process the fact that not only is the federal spending lower than they thought, but it is also lower than the portion of the budget that they believed it should be. Herein lies the value of agnosticism. It guards against certainty. Much blood has been shed based on certainties that were just not true. Since perceptions can seem like realities, we build narratives which become foundations on which we build assumption upon assumption. When we discover that the original assumption, upon which all the others were based, is not true, it falls like a house of cards. To the degree in which we were invested in that narrative is the degree to which we will be embarrassed, maybe even traumatized by its demise. We were living a lie. I had lunch this week with a friend who shared that she had a lucid dream when she was a young mother, in which she was visited by a messenger. The message was that her toddler son was going to die before her, but not until after her father died, and it seemed so real to her that she clung to it. Fast forward 40 years, and the woman's father recently died. That message had haunted her entire life, and now that her father was dead, she was riddled with fear and anxiety that her son was going to die at any moment. She built a grand narrative that lasted her lifetime on simply a nocturnal brain fart. Sometimes we give perceptions way too much power and unmerited influence over our lives. My issue with this way of living is that a person is steered by external data. And the key problem there is steered. Incoming data is unavoidable and amoral. The only person not interpreting events and circumstances is unconscious. However, if one does not have an inner core that is awake, aware, and vibrant, they will likely live their life as one with no agency. They're childish. They're tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every conspiracy theory. What Jesus called a reed swayed by the wind. For lack of a better word, I'll call this thing the soul of a person. Soulless people need to be told what to think, how to act, what to wear, who to be. They have no core. They are robots, only able to do what their programmer coded. Computers that can adapt and think for themselves are called artificial intelligence. Perhaps this soul I'm talking about could also be called intelligence. Intelligence is one's ability to understand something. We're hearing more and more stories of people losing their parents or siblings to Fox News. 2 years ago, on episode 126, I interviewed Jen Sanko, who had made a documentary film called The Brainwashing of My Dad. She watched him change from one person to a completely different person just by watching Fox News for years. If people are hollow inside, a vacuum is created that takes in counterfeit nourishment, pureed baby food, served up by charlatans and con men to the laziest, least intuitive minds over which they can easily exercise power and influence for their own causes, mainly the inflation of their wealth. The condition of soullessness, a person with no agency, fosters a type of insecurity that disables that person from being their person authentically in the room, precisely because they don't have one. No soul, no ownership of their ability to discern their world and make choices. Due to non-use, the muscles that empower one to think for oneself are atrophied, and they are preyed on by the greedy. And here we find ourselves. Welcome to today's America. Decades ago, corporations spotted the credulity of Christians and the GOP and corralled them together into their fold to think, propagate, and vote their agenda. Want to know why a large majority of Christians support Trump? They have no soul. They filled their God-shaped void with God, all right. Gods that humans have created have the substance of cotton candy. They melt in your mouth, they leave you hungry and wanting more, and the steady diet of which will make you lazy and fat. I believe there is no void, no God-shaped or otherwise. We are not born with it. We create the void by believing that we have one, that we're not good enough, that we're not worthy, not powerful, that we're insignificant without a higher power. Those of us who left that brainwashing, soul-stealing lie of religion have set out to rediscover our soul, our inner core, that was there all the time. Not so that we can get an identity or, quote-unquote, find ourselves, but so that we can begin living from that core toward the outside world, not the other way around. Let me say that again. We are trying to rediscover our soul, not so we can get an identity or find ourselves, but so that we can begin living from the inside out, not the other way around. There is no self to find. There's only you showing up in each moment as whatever your soul wants to do or say in real time. No one and nothing should tell you who to be because you already are. I'll close with a prose by David White, posted by my friend Fiona. It's called The Subversive Soul. We tend to focus on and speak about the soul life of an individual in terms of spiritual comfort and deep nourishment, qualities which are a central and abiding dynamic of its presence, but the equally unsettling and disturbing quality, often wild and courageous faculty of belonging inside us that we've come to name the soul, is its ruthless and almost tidal wish to find its own way to a fuller union with the world. The soul is a planner's nightmare, the career counselor's central puzzle, the biographer's conundrum, the saboteur of the puritanical and the unimaginative, an internal abiding spring that is both a source and a flow, an internal stranger at the door of our outer life, about to break everything apart, a pilgrim often suddenly more in love with the horizon than its home, and most disturbingly, someone who would much rather fail spectacularly at their own life than succeed imprisoned drably by the ordinary at someone else's. We taped this conversation with Bonnie on November 3rd, 2018, and with Marie on December 2nd, 2018. The intro music is by Dave Weckl, called Just Groove Me. The segue music on this episode is by Sam Mayer on a handpan in the New York City subway. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is. What are you going to go by today?
Let's just go by Bonnie for now. Someday I'll come out.
Well, you have much too high a profile role in your city.
Oh, yes. Yes, right now I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to make something happen here because nothing happens here.
So can you tell me where you are, or is that too revealing?
No, I live in a town of about 1,300 in West Texas. I'll just say that because if you Google that place, I'll pop up. So
you're painting murals all over town.
Yes.
Whose idea was that?
It was mine. Basically, I've been doing regular artsy canvas art and doing regular art shows. And
I've got one on my wall.
Yes, you do. Yeah, and I like it, but it's kind of like ridiculous, honestly, because it's like stroke the ego. Yeah, I can paint. Pay me some money. And it's fine, but it just didn't. I guess it's like, you mentioned reading the book about death. What's Denial of Death.
Yeah.
Well, I got it, and it has a chapter about why we all need to be a hero. Everybody's got to be a hero.
Right.
And that can be an egotistical thing, or it can be a helpful thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, why am I painting to raise my status as a visual artist when I could do something to help my town?
Wow.
And I kind of stumbled into it, and I saw the results of a couple of small projects. And I thought, this could be something bigger than me. It's back to that Christianity thing that we have in us to live for a cause bigger than ourselves. But this time I'm aware that my ego is partially involved, but it will help my town too.
Yeah, and we know that the ego has gotten a bad rap in some circles. I mean, it's there, it's human, it's never going to go away, and we can manage it. We can befriend it and let it, push us to do things that we would otherwise be maybe afraid to do.
Right.
Or think so lowly of ourselves that we're not worthy to do it. No. It's good. It's
healthy.
Nothing
makes me sadder than a person with potential who's been too afraid to attempt something in fear that they'll be seen as vain or ambitious by the church or the religious organization.
Or anybody, yeah.
Probably the reason why I can stand out here is because so many people are suppressed here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, you're modeling a different way.
That's my real hope to, I'm a weird animal, but people are kind of tuning into me going, there's another way. There's another way to live. I don't have to be afraid to fail or make mistakes or look silly. And my favorite Jim Carrey quote, I don't know if you saw that documentary with him, about him and Andy. I don't know if you saw it
Andy
on Netflix.
Kaufman?
Yes, and he talks a little bit about his starting off in comedy, and he wanted to free people from concern.
Your need for acceptance can make you invisible in this world. Like many of you, I was concerned about going out into the world and doing something bigger than myself, until someone smarter than myself made me realize that there is nothing bigger than myself. Don't let anything stand in the way of the light that shines through this form. Risk being seen in all of your glory. Our eyes are not viewers, they're also projectors that are running a second story over the picture that we see in front of us all the time. Fear is writing that script, and the working title is I'll Never Be Enough. Spend your whole life imagining ghosts, worrying about the pathway to the future, but all there will ever be is what's happening here, and the decisions we make in this moment, which are based in either love or fear. So many of us choose our path out of fear disguised as practicality. What we really want seems impossibly out of reach and ridiculous to expect, so we never dare to ask the universe for it. I'm saying I'm the proof that you can ask the universe for it. I realized one night in LA that the purpose of my life had always been to free people from concern, just like my dad. I did something that made people present their best selves to me wherever I go. How will you serve the world? What do they need that your talent can provide? That's all you have to figure out. I can tell you from experience, the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. You can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love. Relax and dream up a good life.
And I think that is like a huge gift in these times,
Yes.
is to be able to, whether it's like, comedy or music or whatever it is,
yourself.
just to free people from concern.
Yeah. A license.
Yeah.
And if we don't have weird animals, if we don't have people being weird every now and then it's homogenous, it's boring, it's dull, and it's straitjacketed and paralyzed by fear and comparison. And, this, again, going back to the fear of death and the denial of death and the Becker book.
Yes.
Is that I kind of need to feel that I'm a part of the right team. And so there's a tendency and a temptation to blend in.
Right.
And you're changing that course. And there's a lot of new things going on in Nashville. I mean, I've been here for 12 years in this stint, but I was here 4 years before, back in the late 80s and early 90s, and I've seen the city change in many ways, but one of which is murals all over the place. And it really does change the vibe, the mood. There's something about, it's not just beauty, that's certainly a big deal, but I was driving down a road the other day, and all along the side of this long stretch of this road is just this concrete wall. And they probably hired, it looks like, at least 15 different artists, because you can tell that each little segment is definitely a different voice. And they're crazy. Like they're outside the box, or, it's not just a bowl of pears,
Right.
And anyway, I love it. And I love you. I've loved you since you were on the show. I've always known that you were, you were that. And, one of my favorite podcasts and favorite people is Pete Holmes.
Yes.
And his podcast is called You Made It Weird. And his desire is that each guest would come on and do something that's never been done before. That and so the weirder it gets, the better in a lot of people's minds. Yeah.
Normal and perfect are boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I read something last week that said we don't need more average stuff for average people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of I live by little nuggets from podcasts and books. I just like write them down or put them in my phone notes because I need to go back and I need to remember that's what I've got to go for. Because another thought that I had, you were talking earlier about life, is like we are always somewhere between awe and grief. There's every day I think that's why worship was so important to us as church members, because we got to bask in false awe. And now it's real awe, because you and I can look at a caterpillar and not just say, well, God made that, on day 3 or 4, whatever it was when he made the animal 6, whatever, 5, I don't know. Can't remember. But, we don't look at that and go, God made it. We go, wow, it evolved. And it had a common species that went back to the same ancestors and we can go, how in the world did evolution make this? And we get to be alive right now. Wow.
Yeah.
We get to be conscious right now. How cool is that?
And real awe. I'd never really thought about it that way. That if we are, I think maybe, I hate to use terms like we're born to do this because it sounds like there's some kind of intent or teleology, but even in the midst of chaos and randomness, there seems to be something, well, like you said, evolution, and there's something propelling us forward. And that need, if you will, for awe, if it's not exercised organically and authentically and from a real honest place, like I'm genuinely in awe right now, and we have a life that is aweless, void of awe and banal and depressing. That would lead to depression, and I never get an emotional boner.
Right.
And so church was that, but in like you said, it's almost like it's like a drug that gives you a false high. And now that we are aware of both of those things, our need for awe and the presence of false awes, then we okay, I need to exercise intentional awe. And this was on a show a few weeks back or about grief, and grief's the other thing, is that in order to sometimes work through grief, you need to go literally expose your eyes, which thus exposes your brain, which thus releases chemicals, to beauty. And at this time of year, go look at a leaf. Mm-hmm. Go look at a tree that is like on fire with red and yellow and, strange colors. Whatever it is. But by like making yourself look at something, it's kind of stop and smell the roses. Anyway. Yes. Good stuff.
Yeah. I think, I was reading something about the opium epidemic, and it is related to this because all those drugs that people use for whatever reasons, they affect chemicals in our bodies that are already there, serotonin, all those things, what's the one that when you have sex or have a baby? It's oxytocin, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we seek those out. So it makes sense that if we are low on one, but we're depressed about someone dying, we'd go for a walk in the forest. Mm-hmm. And naturally we're looking for something cool or meaning in life, but really our brain is helping us look for the opposite, whatever it is, chemical we need at that moment. Yeah. And that's why I think a lot of our most beautiful moments are in the wake of grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think pretty real. It's biological as well as anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's nothing like tragedy. Well, John and my son, were watching a documentary on the history and the making of hip-hop music.
Yeah.
And these lyrics, they came out of the projects of hardship, you got two choices, prostitution or drug dealing. That art form, and I think the point is that almost all art forms, not only forms, but just good art, comes from suffering and pain. And that's when it gets real, and that's when you tap into something, as opposed to trying to write something that everybody's going to like just because it's time to write something.
Right. And there's there's a thing that I guess it's a concept or a real thing in neuroscience. It's called liminal space. You've probably heard of it.
Yeah, maybe.
It's the period right after you have a tragedy or something goes wrong in your life, like somebody dies, you get a divorce. There's this period of kind of feeling lost.
Oh, yeah.
You don't really, and that's when you are the most creative. And I believe this podcast talked about how, like, so many great things in our history of whether it's novels or ideas or inventions came in the time of the inventor or creators wake of a tragedy, because your brain is somehow more ready for new thought and feelings and making connections. So that's a really cool concept too.
Yeah.
That everything fell apart, but right now I have more depth and more access to putting thoughts together in a new way than I ever have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some of those neural pathways that are kind of ruts have just been raked over with, like, death and pain and suffering.
Right.
So there's a remapping that has to go on in order to reinvent oneself or find who. I think the thing that we say when we lost faith is, how now shall we live, or, who the fuck am I, and why are we here? Yeah. So it kind of creates a blank canvas for a season.
Right. And I think that's whenever we feel alive. I feel like I've been dormant. Sorry about that. I feel like I've been dormant for years, kind of waiting to be myself. And getting rid of religion kind of just gave me permission. Now I'd love to pass that permission on to everybody else without having a witch hunt,
Yeah. And we've talked about the metaphor of the tree, or the tree that grows up next to a fence post, and it just, goes around it. The fence post is consumed by the tree almost, and then when they take the fence down and somehow remove the post, there's this hole. And it's the opposite of the God-shaped void that we tried to fill when we were Christians, or at least we were converted to Christianity. They said that we have a God-shaped void, and then we asked God into our hearts, and it's filled, and now we've fulfilled our purpose on earth to glorify God, etc. But it's the opposite. It's that when we do, actually, it's kind of along the same lines. When we do take out that filler that had pacified that hole, then we're maybe on a mission to fill it with more honest things. So what's going on here is that you reached out to me, I think this week or last, and said, what do you think about the Christian perspective on climate change? And I don't give it a lot of thought. I've always felt like that I think they're apocalyptic. I think they're anticipating the end of the world, and the sooner it gets here, the better, because Jesus is coming on a white horse. So there's not only apathy in some cases, there's anticipation. So that's about the only thing that I've given it any thought. I trust the scientists that it's real, that it's man-made, and we should be doing something about it. I feel impotent to be doing anything about it other than recycling every now and then, or driving less or something. But what is your concern, and what initiated your reaching out to me?
Well, whenever I started deconverting about 3 or 4 years ago, I still wasn't convinced that, climate change, global warming was caused by humans. I kind of wanted to believe that this was just a natural earth cycle, because the implications of the other is way too horrible, and I don't really want to change what I'm doing.
Yep.
I love NPR science shows a lot, and one was about hidden brain, and I think it was back in 2015. It said why our brains don't get the facts of global warming. And then this last week, the New York Times had another article talking about what happens if we don't change course. And the one thing that changed my mind about whether this was human caused or natural earth cycle was the fact that they have this man who lives on the edge, I think it's Alaska, and he does samples. I think he uses some kind of balloon thing and takes air samples from the atmosphere. And he's been doing it since his father did it for decades and decades before. It's passed on to this younger science son. And they test the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And they're like, well, it naturally goes up and down, but there's like a difference in carbon. One kind of carbon, I believe, has some kind of radioactive dating, and that's the kind that comes from the earth, the sunshine, the natural radiation of the planet. And there's another kind of carbon that is only caused by fossil fuels and like animal waste or methane. If I'm getting this wrong, just know I'm not a scientist. But basic is the measurements on the man-made carbon are through the roof.
Mm.
And it shocked me. I'm like, we really are destroying ourselves. We really are having an impact on this planet. And if what they say is true in the New York Times, that if 2 degrees of change in the next 20 years, the oceanside cities are going to be flooded and we're going to be out of food, and the poor are going to suffer more. You know, places like India, China, where there's so many people are going to suffer. And we're going to be affected here in big ways. Our kids are not going to live in a world that we know now. They're going to have it much, much, much worse. And we're set for that course and nothing is changing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's dark. And I think I'm always referencing this, and we've already referenced it twice, but humans are good at compartmentalizing that which they can't handle or just don't want to deal with, and it's too much to bear. It's burying your head in the sand. And it's coming. And even the demise of I think the United States is an empire that is about to fall, just like all empires have fallen eventually. And our 250-year run, or whatever we've had, is over. And there's that. But on the bigger scale, I don't know if anybody else thinks about these kind of things. It seems kind of stupid and simple, but I do it all the time. And that is just in my little office alone, which is the Department of Anthropology at the University of Vanderbilt. Well, the amount of cardboard, styrofoam, paper, plastic, waste that we generate, and we ain't nothing. Like, we got 30 faculty, we got 3 or 4 staff. We are a dinky little thing. I think about like the tower, the World Trade Center. How many photocopy machines went down in that? And how many reams of paper. And anyway, I just know that there's rumors, obviously, of the ocean being full of plastic, and landfills can only do so much, and burning trash just creates more of that carbon you were talking about, and. Just even the water that we recycle. I just think there's a finite end coming to the way that we fuck up this planet. And that's all kind of aside from climate change. I'm sure they overlap as far as, contributing to each other. But, but it's coming, and I don't know what to do about it. And I think that.
Well, I think my point was, let's say there's a bunch of people like you and I who are free thinkers who are also lazy. I mean, I have plastic straws. That's the newest sin. I have plastic straws in my house where we used to drink from. That's supposedly killing turtles in the ocean. I should care more. I should. But I just kind of have this gap between belief and reality. Like, well, my straw's not going to hurt a turtle, Yeah. And it's easier just to keep going forward than to make big changes. I am the worst person to make big changes. But obviously we got to do something, I guess, unless our grandkids look back at us and hate us for what we could have changed. So, anywho, even if all of the free thinkers in the world decided right now we're going to all together do something, it still leaves the religious people who are waiting for us to destroy ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a really good ending to this story, I don't think. I don't know.
No. But it makes me think, I guess my main reason to text you and tell you about this is it makes me want to be a bolder free thinker.
Okay.
It makes my plight, maybe I can't save the planet by using no more plastic straws, but I know I can affect the planet if I can teach people and help people think for themselves.
Yeah.
That's going to, I think, make a bigger impact than getting somebody to choose an electric car. But my point is, do you remember, Cass, when you were a Christian, how you responded to disasters? What was your first instinct?
Well, to pray. And secondly, maybe just seek God's face as to why he allowed this to happen. I don't know. Those are my first two that come to mind.
Did you ever find, like Pat Robertson, a reason to blame those who'd suffered?
I used to believe God's favor over any people or any land was the only way that humans could prosper, that every other way was in a constant state of entropy, and God was the only one that could turn that. So if my people will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, I will heal their land and, forgive their sins or whatever. And so I felt like that tragedy was often, like C.S. Lewis called, the megaphone to wake a deafening church. And
Right.
And so it was, I didn't ever blame the loss, like some say, well, it's because of gays or of abortion. I always blamed, I used to say this, and I'm sure you've heard this, that darkness is the absence of light. Mm-hmm. So if darkness is happening, it's because the light is dim, and the light is the church, and we're the hope. We're the city on the hill. So if I did do any blaming, it was interiorly. Is that a word?
Yeah. Well, maybe I probably experienced a little less nice attitude, but it was never really blatant, but it was more like inferred, kind of like that phrase, inside every bless your heart's a little fuck you.
Yeah. So what are you saying, that the church you were a part of just went on the blame game right away?
Well, there's almost like it's not my problem. Mm-hmm. You gays or you liberals that got hit by that hurricane. I mean, or even worse was like, well, it sucks that all those people died in India, but the Lord says, in the Bible that right before the end of the world, there's going to be these earthquakes and storms, and you're not going to be able to tell one season from the other, and man will lie with man. And so, let it burn, because we get to go home sooner. Yeah. We're like pre-trib or mid-trib or whatever we are, but we're getting out of here, and we're not going to have to suffer, and fuck them. Yeah. That's what I see.
So there is a great danger in the message that we get in Scripture, as far as that leads and lends to apathy.
Oh, it's not just apathy. I believe it's also like almost a sadistic, like, haha, you're getting yours. And I think with Trump, I've noticed it even more. People are more likely to post something sadistic like, haha, you got yours, than they were maybe 10 years ago.
That's funny. You're the second time I've heard that said, at least this week, and especially in the wake of the shooting at the synagogue, just all the tragedies that happened this week. And there has been, the response was more delight, from the far right than I'd ever seen before. So there's some real bigotry, or courageous bigotry going on that I've never witnessed in my lifetime.
Well, and it's an us versus them thing.
Sure.
That
which is
Christians believe they love the world, but they don't want to get their hands dirty. I mean, they'll make you a casserole, but they're definitely not going to help you raise that kid that you wanted to abort. Mm-hmm. Oh, and we're not going to pay welfare for you either, because you should, not get pregnant. They're just. They don't make any sense. It was kind of like my mother-in-law. I was kind of talking to her one day before the election, and we'd always been very conservative. I think she kind of got the idea that we had lowered our standards in her mind. And I said, I think that abortion should be legal. And she said, I don't. I said, but what about a girl who, could die from trying to get an abortion, like in the back alley, from somebody who's not certified in an unclean clinic? What if she dies from trying to get an abortion? And she said, well, she did it. She deserves it.
Mm-hmm. Shouldn't have got pregnant. Shouldn't have been wearing that short skirt.
Yeah. So I guess I'm not a climate change expert.
No.
But I do think Christianity is a bigger issue than just stupid people on Facebook and people who irritate us or people who elect Donald Trump.
Okay.
I think it's way bigger than that.
Okay, yeah. So on the debate line that we have on this show occasionally, and it's across the kind of the atheist community or whatever, is this spectrum of, okay, benign Christianity is no big deal, leave them alone, and there are versions of that. Like you just said, there are people that do adopt children that are unwanted because their Christianity does show up in a way that is
right.
That is authentic and helpful and practical. And then there's those like No Illusions on the Scathing Atheists and stuff that insist that Christianity specifically, but religion in general, is evil, is counterproductive, is destructive, and it has to be stopped. There's that firebrand atheism. And so sounds like you're kind of pointing to that side of things, to where it's like, it's dangerous that they're stupid, that they elected Trump, but then this is actually, there is no greater cost than literally the end of the species. And I would say the end of the world, but the world's going to be fine.
Right. The world's going to go on for a while.
It'll bounce back. It's not going to be fine, but it'll bounce back once we leave, because we're the cancer.
Right. Well, I agree with the let's get rid of Christianity, but I also don't think it's going to happen by force or being loud. Mm-hmm. The same way we would evangelize people when we were Christians, through kindness, through reason, through hospitality. I think that just doing good deeds because they need to be done, and letting our light shine before others so they'll come to their reason. Yeah. I think it's not going to be, some people it may take debates and proof, but I really think you walk beside people who are clutching on to Christianity and they watch you walk in freedom, perhaps they will start to let go. Mm-hmm. And it may be one-on-one, one person at a time. But I don't think we should just they're not doing any harm, because I think for the most part, the ones who are really, really dedicated to the Bible and how there's nothing that's infallible, those are the ones who tend to be drawn to these mega churches with lots of money and have the power and pay the politicians. And there's a direct, in my opinion, all the fancy people in the small towns around here, there's not famous people, but they all tend to go to the churches that lean really hard, to the right. Mm-hmm. And they are the decision makers, the people who elected Donald Trump,
Yeah. Yeah, they're influential in your little town and your county there. And they're getting their cues from a fundamentalist pastor behind the pulpit, wagging his finger.
Right.
I think you just mentioned, and it goes back to your episode over almost a year and a half ago, the Bonnie and Clyde thing, that there was some degree, I think, of you were usurping the stronghold of theocracy and the juggernaut that is powerful Christianity over the culture, especially in small rural West Texas, and that you were coming at it like you said, not by being louder, and not by even trying to show them a spreadsheet of the facts of climate change being man-made, but helping them come out from underneath the stranglehold of toxic Christianity. And we know this, that I think we think this, we strongly believe this, that the more they release themselves, their brains, from underneath the kind of the brainwashing of 100% adherence to the inerrant Word of God, the tractor beam hypnosis of fear and punishment and reward of being a good Christian, and they start to get a little bit of agency, get a little bit of themselves showing up. And the more that they emerge as a thinker, the more that they will guide, the truth will guide themselves into climate change and things that you and I can't really address with any expertise.
Right.
So it's a subtle, and it's a
subversive.
Yeah.
But it's not even intentional. It's not like you and I are becoming an apostle, or, we're not becoming evangelists for secularism.
No.
It's just that humans are very good without God.
Yeah.
Some people are really, really damn good without God, even better. And you can't prove that to anybody except by walking it out in front of them.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks for the chat. I don't know if we, in a way we didn't solve anything, but I don't know.
No. But I do think that it might make people think when they're having conversations with other people, mm-hmm. and somebody blows off the idea about climate change. And just remember that for them to accept what's being told to them, they're going to have to open more than their mind about science. It's going to challenge their belief about what happens to the earth and who's in control. Mm-hmm. So they're shutting the door before they even begin to consider what's going on in the world.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and not only your life, but your the fact that you've taken up this, the thing about, I was going to say, the murals, but the thing about art or just the human expression is it's like a river. It's like powerful rushing water, and it needs to go somewhere. And here you were kind of in your little studio making canvas work.
Yeah.
And that river in you, which I think if anybody's heard your other episode and know you at all, that you're a force of nature. And here it shows up out in the streets. It flows out of your little studio in your house and out into the streets. How many of these are you trying to do?
52 in 1 year. But I don't plan on doing them all myself because I'm not doing it for myself. I want my town that's just like every other town to have an identity that's unique. I want to facilitate future artists and put the spotlight on them too, Have any of them kind of come out of the woodwork? Oh, yeah. I have a whole lineup of artists. I have 8 right now that are painters, and I have way more than that are indicating they want to do this. Then I'm trying to raise the money and put them up in the right place with a nice place to stay and food and cater them because I want to treat them well. Mm-hmm. They're coming from out of town? Oh, yeah. I'm trying to get people from, other states. I want it to not just be cute. Look at that cute tractor on the side of that building. I want it to be world class. Yeah. Because that's what's amazing. Well, yeah. Have you had any, news people come out and put you on the air? We do have some Texas Monthly, Southern Living, Texas Highways. We're in contact with them. I don't know. You lived in Oklahoma. You know about Texas Country Report. I don't know if you watched it. There's a few things come up. And then there's a documentary crew that's kind of been following me around too. So. Oh, yes. Great. That is awesome. So do these other artists have to show you like a storyboard of what they have in mind and you approve it, or where's the buck stop? I'm getting to know them personally. I go through their portfolio, kind of point at some things that I love, and I start searching for perfect locations. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Wait. No, it doesn't make sense. What's the perfect location? So, but I just kind of I like your elephants you did here. That would look great in this park because we're going to do something kind of circus themed there. And then I just set them free. Yeah, not just anywhere. There's a spot that would be best for this. Right. Okay. Right. Trying to be a curator of my town, like a drive-through gallery. Well, here's the other thing, is stewardship and ownership. Like when we care about something, in this case the earth, and we like it, and something comes against it, I think after a while, maybe some people won't even care if it's man-made or not. They care about their city, their country, their planet, and they might do something just out of love for what is. Yeah, I think a lot of us, everybody wants to leave a mark on the world. They want to know that they mattered, that they were significant in some way. And we all get the idea that we're supposed to be world known. If I can just make these little people in my little corner of the world a little bit happier, then my life counted, Yeah. It doesn't have to be global. No, it doesn't have to be global at all. I mean, the investment that you've made in your own children is, you matter already, whether this happened or not. All right. Well, gosh, I love you. Appreciate you calling. It's always good to talk to you. I think you're an impressive, powerful, wonderful, intriguing, creative powerhouse of a human being. Well, hey, guess what? I want to talk to you again when I get finished with this project, and I'll share the teaser or preview of the documentary when it's done on the private group. Okay, for sure. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Cass. All right. So that's my conversation with Bonnie, which is not her real name. Bonnie and Clyde, back on episode 162, was a great show. Up next is my conversation with Marie Delafont, my new co-host and manager. She wants to know if she can be real, if she can be powerful, if she can be my equal, if she can stop the steamroll of my 52 years of patriarchy. And I hope the answer is yes, and we're going to do our best to be that and to practice that. And I couldn't be more excited. Anyway, here's our talk. Marie Delafont.
I texted you 2 days ago and was like, we should talk on the phone because I'm nervous about things, and you're like, okay. And so you and I have already had a talk this week about the podcast and about like our dynamic and stuff. And I thought that was a really interesting discussion because I'm coming into it with a lot of anxiety over like several things, one being putting my voice out there, the skill and confidence and finesse that it takes to insert your voice into a conversation like a podcast, especially when all of the participants are remote.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of anxiety that I was holding about this. And like, I was super nervous about your expectations and if I was going to meet them and if we would be able to work together, if I was going to be, I think I used the term token woman.
Yeah.
I know there's been discussion about how this podcast could benefit from a different representation other than two older white men from Tennessee. And I'm excited to be a different voice. And at the same time, I'm really nervous. I was really nervous about becoming a token woman because I was afraid that I might get talked over, and I wasn't sure that I felt comfortable in demanding space, and I didn't know if that space was going to be granted to me, and I didn't know if I could speak up and say, hey, remember that thing you just said? It's slightly misogynist, and I'm going to try to tell you why. Like, I didn't know if there was going to be a space for me to do that, and if I didn't want to embarrass you on your own podcast.
Well, see, those are the things, right? Like I want to be the guy that is impossible to embarrass,
right.
or impossible to offend. Ideally,
right.
that's a nice ideal. And I want to be that guy. And I want to be that guy so bad that I'm certainly willing to, especially like since we don't know in advance what that's going to look like, just give each other the green light to like no holds barred. Everything is on the table. And we've expanded the Talk Aboutable to unlimited, no censorship, nothing. And so one in the context of the word token, I thought our talk yesterday was enlightening for me, and I was wishing that we had that conversation on tape. But I've seen the term, I know the term, and you see it in movies where it's like this is a token black guy, or there's some, we have a person in the mix just so that the powers that be can pat themselves on the back or something. And you made reference, and we don't have to leave names or say anything,
right.
But you made reference to a situation to where a woman that is very powerful and very smart and very educated and opinionated. She was going in as a panel or a part of a podcast, and you were just certain that, boy, she's really going to represent. She's really going to speak and be equally honored and respected in the context of that conversation.
Right.
Only to witness it deteriorate to the point where she was just a giggling female token, and it was hard. It was painful for you to watch happen.
Yeah.
I think when you described that, and you did it better than I just did, but I was like, oh shit. I mean, I just know that there are blind spots in a white cisgendered male like myself, but even that concept of like, oh my gosh, how easy it is for, I don't know, alpha males to just steamroll not only a woman, but just any beta in the room. Yeah, exactly. But especially a woman, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And I personally hate the word alpha male, and I don't exactly know why. I feel like it's a misnomer. I think it's not an efficient way to explain what's going on. But I think even in our conversation yesterday, I don't really feel like the qualities of a so-called alpha male are necessarily bad in so much as they're qualities that they come by naturally. Like if they're just, a very confident, outspoken person, like there's nothing wrong with that. I think bulldozing people who don't match your subconscious hierarchy is not okay. Yeah. But point being is the conversation that I had to have with you yesterday was to find out what you were what exactly you were, because it's okay for you to have these qualities where you're confident and you articulate your passions and your thoughts. And then is there any room left for anyone else to speak? And I thought that the conversation that we had about that was really interesting, because you want to show up in the world with your view and talk about your view. And it's not that you think your view is without doubt the best view, but you want other people to show up to the conversation too and fight you, you know, like not so that you can be proven right again and again, but to kind of have your view enhanced if at all possible. And then it turns out that people are intimidated by your confidence. And plus you add on top of that, this patriarchal dynamic of, you know, a person like yourself being a cisgender white male, and people end up being intimidated. And a lot of people aren't going to cry tears for you, but like, I do feel bad, like that you, like you're well-intentioned, but then maybe you end up feeling lonely because people are intimidated by your amount of confidence.
Yeah.
And no one else, or maybe less people, feel comfortable fighting your voice and saying, nah, Cass, you're full of shit. Here's what I think. And those people are hard to come by. And I love those people.
Yeah.
Like the people who will call you out on your shit.
Yeah. And that's you. As far as what I think of when I say alpha, and where I think that comes from, for me, I mean, I'm not saying this is the facts or this is the science, but this is what goes through my head. You know, it goes back to like the ape, you know, the ape family, or even the dog, you know, the pack of dogs, and how they're, at least in that primal sense, there's somebody that's taking the leadership position, and it just kind of defaults to somebody.
Yeah.
But every tribe or sub-tribe is probably going to end up having one. Now, let's acknowledge that that's primal. And that's very lizard brain, you know, that's not high. It's not pretty. I mean, ideally, and you know, even like the Occupy Wall Street movement, they were all about no leaders, you know, no alphas, and plural leadership and everything like that. And honestly, I've been a part of a lot of organizations that aspired to that, and it's a wonderful aspiration, and sometimes it works. I think there are some contexts, and I think the military comes to mind. Like if you're on a mission, or where time is of the essence and preciseness is a big deal, then you really can make big mistakes when there's too many chiefs. And so somebody needs to just tell us what to do, and we all have to do it, no questions asked. And I think in the military context, that probably is more efficient. But anyway, all of this to say, only in some contexts am I an alpha male. Because like, I'm really not. Like, I'm fairly feminine, and I'm fairly pussy. I'm not like a football jock stud. So there are a lot of contexts in which I would not be considered the alpha in the room, you know. Does that make sense?
Depends on what quality that you're talking about. Yeah, you don't encompass all the stereotypical qualities of what you would think an alpha male is. I mean, because I'm just thinking about this book that I read about, what's her name, who worked with the chimpanzees? Jane.
Yeah, Goodall.
Yeah, Jane Goodall. I read a book about her. It was terribly boring, but like I learned a lot about the chimpanzees and the alpha dynamic there. And so when you say alpha male, and I think about this species, and I'm like, no, you're not that. Like,
right.
You're none of that. Like, I think all you are is like the kind of human that, like, in some ways, that I want to be, someone who's very comfortable with the truth, someone who's very comfortable with just saying, yep, this is me. Hello. You know,
yes.
And here's what I think about things. Do you think any differently? Let's talk about it. Yeah. You don't sugarcoat things a whole lot, but you're flexible at the same time. And I think that's a dynamic that people aren't used to. Yeah. I like it because I see your faults, and you talk about your faults. There's nothing that I could bring up that you didn't already talk about on air like a million times. And so, like, when I think about an alpha male, I feel like it's somebody who's hiding their faults, denying their faults, not talking about their faults, compensating for their faults with violence or dominion.
Or big trucks.
Yeah, and that's what I was afraid you were, right? Because like I don't actually know you, and I don't think most of your listeners don't actually know you. They know the insecurities and challenges that you've aired, but you used audio editing software to clip it up in some ways, and so you cleaned it up so you know what you want to release out there. And so it's mildly filtered and people don't see you in real life. And so all I'm trying to say is that I also didn't know, like, okay, what is this dude about? Because you in general, all of us would be one person while being watched.
Yeah.
We are all very different when we're being watched or recorded. So I think that was what my phone call with you yesterday was like, so we're going to do this, but who the hell are you? Like, can I work with you? Are you safe? Can we talk about, like, is it safe to talk about misogyny, like, as I see it? Like, is it safe? Is this a safe space? And I get the impression that my impression of you is that you might still have like some latent misogyny in you, but that you are someone who is extremely receptive to being called out on your shit, which puts you in this really strange catch-22 where you're like, call me out. But you say it like confidently, like, please call me out. And everyone else is like, oh my God, you're coming off like really like strong. And I don't want to call you out because what if I don't articulate things well? And so that's just a ramble just to say that I just had to check to see what you were all about yesterday. And I feel comfortable to know like that I could, I can just say what I think and that there's space for that and that there's a healthy room for back and forth on like disagreement on things or, self-edification sort of things.
And just one last thing before we just make this all about me. I'm getting uncomfortable with how much, but, and something you said earlier, and it's mixed into this whole thing with the dynamic of how people have related to me for years. And I know that nobody's crying for me because it's the highest of privilege. And I understand that this literally is my world.
Yeah.
All that aside, it has been a pattern in my life for people to choose either to disengage with me or to fire me or to, somehow marginalize me, quarantine me rather than deal with me because for whatever reason, I've made it difficult to be approachable. Or, that's the perception. So this is something that I want to tweak or hone or rein in or create a space or an environment where people do feel safe or, I mean, I'm 52, but I do feel like I'm in the, at least the last half of the game, last quarter, maybe, or a third of the life. And so I realized that I pretty much fucked it all up, and I don't know how much I can salvage or redeem by all of a sudden becoming a more approachable person than I've ever been. But I want to give it a shot. So one phrase that has come up a lot in my life is, "Do you want to be right or do you want to be lonely?"
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that they're trying to say, if you're a know-it-all and if you're a my way or the highway ass fuck, then you're going to be alone. And I just want you to know that. Now, if you're okay with being alone, that's fine. But you can't be both insisting that you're right and be in a community of people that where there's mutual respect or whatever.
Right.
And I obviously understand that and I agree with that. And what I've run into, though, is that there's been times in my life when people have used that because they felt like they were bringing a knife to a gunfight. They could pull out the smart bomb of that and say, you want to be right or you want to be alone? In a way, kind of twisting my arm to give in to whatever we're arguing about. And there is a point at which a person decides, is this a hill to die on or not? So if we're debating whether, the sun rises in the east or the west or something, and it's just getting hotter and hotter, the argument is getting meaner and meaner, and finally somebody says, all right, I love you, more than I love this argument. And so I think I'm just going to, wave the white flag and prioritize our relationship over being right. And sometimes there's been an issue where it really was a hill that I was willing to die on. And I wasn't going to just concede that you're right just so I could keep the friendship or keep the relationship.
Well, doesn't that feel like a false dichotomy to you? Like that every argument that you're in has to have a winner and a loser?
Yeah, good point.
There doesn't. Like sometimes it's just interesting to discuss with someone the differences in your opinion, and you might take something from that. You might not agree with their ultimate conclusion, but you might take a new frame of view based on their perception, and there doesn't need to be a winner or a loser. Like I argue all the time with my husband and with my boyfriend, and we all have very different opinions, and nobody, like, I can't think of a single time when I've ever changed their mind. But I never fucking give in unless they have a good argument. Why the fuck would I say, well, you know what? I love you, therefore I'm going to turn off my intellect right now.
There you go. That's
fuck that.
Yeah, no, totally.
No, it's just at a certain point, if one of you starts getting really aggravated and becomes really emotional about it, that's just the point where you're like, I think we're at a point right now where like the conversation really isn't going to be productive. Like, and I want to have this respectful, productive conversation with you. And let's maybe just like take a break right now. No one needs to fucking win. Like maybe an argument is about like challenging yourself to see if you can see it in a different way. Why does it have to be about overcoming someone else's view? Yeah.
And that's a perfectly good point. And I think that's what it's why I think you wanted to not only be on the show, but to talk with me about the space that we're going to have,
right? Or
at least the relationship and the dynamic here. And
right.
The beautiful thing is that I've always really, really looked up to this kind of thing, and the thing that always comes to my mind is James Carville and Mary Madeline, and back in like '92. Bill Clinton was running for president and James Carville was his like campaign manager. And he's married to Mary Madeline, who was literally George Bush's campaign manager in that same fucking election.
Yeah.
So they came home and went to bed at night, with each other while literally, locking horns every day for a couple of years at least,
Yeah.
And even to this day, she remains a Republican and he remains a Democrat. And I've seen interviews with them, and in a way they're just iconic to me, or at least they represent an aspiration that is just ideal. But it's a great thing to shoot for. And I was trying to think of some things. I mean, we haven't been on the air together long enough, nor have we known each other long enough to really have any great examples of like, oh yeah, here's an example. Marie believes this and Cass believes this, and
yeah,
and yet they get along fine.
Yeah.
But just to maybe broach that subject, or maybe try to uncover what might be there. I remember once I'm a big fan of Mark Manson, and he wrote the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and he's got a lot of YouTubes out there, and he says some things that are somewhat
provocative.
Yeah. And I remember one time saying something about Mark Manson, and you said, "Ew, I don't care for that guy." So let's go there. What are your qualms with Mark Manson?
It's nothing like extreme. It's absolutely a preference thing. I have read his shit, and I don't entirely disagree with his main points about how he sees the world, but I get bristly when people articulate themselves like he does, which is oversimplifying, talking down to people, very dismissive. And that's the tone that I feel that he has. He doesn't feel like someone that I could argue with because it just feels like he's kind of an asshole about his opinion.
Yeah. Well, and wouldn't you say that that's even more so uncomfortable or distasteful for you that he's a white male?
I don't even know that he's white. I have no idea what he looks like.
Okay.
All I know is that he's a male, but
yeah.
I don't automatically hate everything that every single male says.
Well, and obviously we all have the right to say, I kind of like what this person writes. 90% of what they write I agree with, but whatever. And that's afforded to us because of just the mere distance. And we're never going to be in the same room with Mark Manson, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
Right. But hopefully maybe what we can begin to model is, I'm looking forward to us discovering what it is that we disagree on and then actually practicing what we're preaching and see what that looks like.
Right. Yeah. And something that I was reminded of yesterday was just to make sure that this was going to be a safe space for me to disagree, to have strong opinions, to perhaps call you out on shit. And one thing that I keep thinking about is that I just wanted to make sure you knew and weren't looking for another Bob.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because Bob was your sidekick. And after I've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks, I'm like, I don't want to be a sidekick at all. Like, I want this to be a space where we can call each other out, where we both have a strong voice, and I don't want to diminish yours, and I don't want you to diminish mine. And that just kind of makes me think of the story that I told you last night, and kind of summarizes, I think, what our intentions are as co-hosts, is how my husband sent me an article about these Black kids in Minnesota who were at McDonald's getting some food, and it was taking a while because their cash register couldn't read their little, the phone, the way that you can pay for stuff using your phone. They're having problems with that. It was taking a little while, and someone in the back of the line got real pissed off, this white guy, and made a joke about them using welfare stamps or something, and the kids got pissed off at him, and he pulled out a gun. So the article was just very, I can't remember the words you used. It was just very...
sensationalized a little bit.
Yeah, it's sensational. And of course it is sensational. What the fuck was that guy thinking? Of course it is sensational. But if you're trying to educate yourself, especially if you're someone who doesn't understand this racism stuff, if you read an article that's so sensationalized, you're going to be turned off by all this opinion that's embedded into it instead of a nice, solid piece of journalism. Yeah. And so I didn't like that at all. I was like, this is really difficult to read. The words that I used to my husband was, this is really hard to take seriously with the tone that the writer is using. And my husband called me the fuck out. He was like, you should be careful about what kind of words that you're using. When you say that it's hard to take them seriously, it makes it sound like you don't believe their story. And there is an ongoing issue with white people constantly not believing these stories of people of color or marginalized groups experiencing this kind of horrible treatment. And I was just stunned. I was like, how fucking dare you? Do not social justice warrior me right now. I am woke. How dare you? I didn't say any of this, but I was really reactive inside. And I was like, I can't talk to you about this right now. And he just kept calling me out. And I was like, nope, I can't talk to you right now. Later, we connected. And in the end, we got on the same page, and it was just like, okay, he's just being really careful about semantics. I felt like I could just be lazy with my words because it was in a chat environment, but whatever. We kind of understood what each other was saying. But in the end, I said to him, I was like, please don't stop doing that. Please keep calling me out. If you see me doing some stupid shit, call me out. The fact that you're my husband and that you love me, and you still called me out on something that you felt would negatively impact marginalized groups, and you called me out, your wife. That is so fucking amazing. I'm so fucking proud of you for doing that. Keep doing that. Please don't let me get away with this shit. Even if I disagreed with you in this instance, that I was so proud of him. And anyway, that's just, for me, that is a story that represents to me what I hope that you and I can be together on this, like that we mutually care
sure.
about each other and that we can talk about differences respectfully and that we call each other out of love and out of the desire to build each other up into more authentic, more loving beings that we both know that we want to be in this world.
Yes. And there's a lot here I want to address, because there's the word nuance just has to come up in every show. And so there I have it. I mean, we just put it out there, but the human, oh man, our relations on every front, every type of relation we have is so laden with minefields or landmines that could, really turn things south quickly. And so I both want to, be the best version of myself I can be, maintain the relationships that often do take maintenance. Like it's not like a garden that you can just plant seeds and walk away because it'll get overridden with. I mean, there are things that take maintenance, that take intentionality. And I think healthy relationships are like that. Also, there's a part of me that is, I guess, lazy, for lack of a better word, that just wants to be with people who aren't wanting me to dot my I and cross my T. Yeah. And I know that's not what you're saying about your husband, but there, I just kind of want to have a select few people in my life where when I'm with them, it's the equivalent emotionally of being alone.
Yeah.
That's to me like the height of a friend, is that I'm not compelled at all to fill the air with jabber. Like awkward silence doesn't exist. It's just silence.
Yeah, totally.
These people are going to sift everything that comes out of my mouth, and not just spin it, but like to just interpret it in a way like I know Cass well enough to know that this is what he means or whatever.
Right.
So I covet that.
And I think that can exist together, like I didn't totally call you out on you calling yourself a pussy, which is a little a little misogynistic.
The use of the word pussy.
Yeah, you called yourself a pussy. And I'm
that's like saying he runs like a girl, something like that.
Yeah, I'm like, those are actually pretty nice. Like, I don't know what you're complaining about. Like, if you really want to insult yourself, call yourself a pair of balls, because those are super sensitive.
Yeah. That's a good example, though, of saying, okay, time out for a second, not to focus on the content, or whenever somebody says, okay, time out, don't say the word pussy, I'm like, okay. And then I just want to, but I'm probably in the middle of trying to make a point. And so I don't want this to be derailed by the semantics, Yep. And yet that, when else are you going to address it? Like you just did, like now we are like 30 minutes later, you're now bringing it up. And when else, I mean, in real time, would it have derailed the conversation? And
right.
Those are sensitive things.
Right. And I was only saying that to contribute to the idea that you can have a friendship with someone that includes both.
Yes.
Like someone who will call you out at one point, but then won't call you out 30 minutes before because, wanting to give you space to articulate yourself. And so you kind of pick and choose when you want to address things. Yeah. So that was my only point. I understand what you're saying, though, that like kind of derailing you in the middle of a point, though. Well,
and also to Bob's credit, I mean, I don't think I know what you mean when you say sidekick. And Bob and I are old, and we're old school, and we grew up on Johnny Carson, and there was always Ed McMahon, and so there's there's the guy and then his sidekick, and it's kind of the way things were done. Now that said, Bob would never let me say something that he disagreed with. I mean, he wasn't a yes man. And, but it was just a different dynamic.
Right.
And than the one that you're wanting to put on and to bring. And I don't want another Bob, I mean,
right.
That was a 4-year season of Cass and Bob. And now we're going to do this Cass and Marie, or Marie and Cass, whichever name comes first.
It's alphabetical.
It's alpha male betical.
No, alphabetical.
I know. I was playing on words. So I think love and mutual respect is a giant safety net for the more insane acrobat tricks that you can do up above. Like you're going to take much more risks and chances you're going to try that extra flip because you know that if you don't catch the next person's hand or the bar or something, you're just going to fall into the net. You're going to be fine. And so if love and respect are there, not only does it change everything, it literally coats everything in love and respect such that it's never going to be interpreted as a jab or as a diminishment or a condescension. It's not going to, we know that that's not happening. No matter how fierce or disagreeable the conversation gets. It's not the words that make them fighting words. It's the intent. It's everything's on the table. It's open game because we're never going to turn on each other in a way that is betrayal.
Right. But I just get stuck on the word intention because I keep on thinking, in this discussion, I keep on thinking about other dynamics, like when people of color try to explain what it's like to be a person of color in this country to a white person, and maybe they have a respectful, loving relationship, and that white person shows so much ignorance and invalidation of their experience, and it's out of love because they're trying to understand. So I still feel like there's a way that you can feel hurt in a discussion with someone that you love if they don't understand your experience, even if they're trying to do their best to listen and trying to be well-intentioned. Well-intentions happen all the time with white people, and they still keep fucking hurting people. So I think more than intention, I think it's, I don't know if this helps the conversation, but the word impact sticks out to me a lot. What was the impact of what you say on someone else more than intention? Because we shouldn't just get brownie points for having good intentions all the time.
No, it's good. I mean, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? I mean,
right.
And it's not enough. It's not enough. I cannot, I really get frustrated when you say to somebody, that really hurt. And they say, well, I didn't mean to.
Right.
Ouch.
Right.
I was like, well, I don't give a fuck what you meant. It still hurt. Let's talk about it so we can prevent it from happening again or something.
Right. And then that's the problem with the whole intentions thing. It's you got to let go of your ego and recognize that if you did something that hurt someone, it doesn't matter if you had good intentions. Pat yourself on the back that you had good intentions, but now look outwards and say, okay, but I still did hurt this person. There's something I don't understand about what just happened here. How can I learn without blaming yourself? Just recognizing you have something to learn here.
This again is just how nuanced relationships are, because I think of this, this situation, for example, a person is, I don't know, somehow hurt or whatever. And sometimes we use this phrase, that's on them, or that's not my problem.
Yeah.
Or the fact that they were offended, or the fact that they were hurt, or the fact that they don't like me, that's kind of really where it goes. It's like, well, I can't do anything about that. And I think that's probably what it comes down to is if there is something that we can do to make this better and we don't do it, then we're really not invested, in the high road, ethically, morally, but also taking the relationship to another level.
Yeah.
Well, and just to sum up this conversation, I got something else I want to talk about, but to sum this up, yes, you are safe. Yes, I want your voice to confront and be free to say and feel and express whatever it wants to say, feel, and express without censorship, other than your own personal censorship. That's, we're all bringing that. But this notion of you witnessing a friend of yours, or at least somebody that you were familiar with, a powerful woman, get steamrolled in a situation where you thought she was going to really be, equal and shine and have her voice instead of being respected. I mean, the way we talked about it yesterday and the way you unpacked that, I literally was moved to tears, because I'd never thought, and I'm a steamroller, man. I've done it to my wife for all these years. I've done it to people my whole life. And it's like, oh shit. And I think there is a place, and this kind of goes to that last point. Like I said earlier, I want to be around people who, I can be myself and they sift it. And I imagine maybe even when I said that the first time that there was a check in your in your body as far as, oh, you want to remain being an asshole and unaccountable. And there's that. I mean, there is that. I'm capable of that. I think everybody's capable of that.
Well, it sounds like you just want some time off too. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to constantly be corrected.
That would be better than just ending or beginning the relationship like black. You're very much a non-black and white thinker. You're always finding the gray. And I think that's obviously beautiful and powerful, and we need that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just saying that when and if you feel, or even the listeners feel that I'm steamrolling or that you've become a token, then yes, I want to know about it. And I know that you will.
Yeah.
I know you, you will.
Yeah. No, that's why we talked yesterday. I just needed to make sure, like, can I call you out?
Yeah.
If you do stupid shit, can I call you out? Because otherwise I don't want to be here.
I look forward to this because I'm also going to push back sometimes when you call me out. I'm going to say, okay, well, I need to understand this because right now, just the fact that you're saying X doesn't mean that I have to kowtow to it either. So
absolutely. Yeah. Just because I'm a woman and we're talking about white privilege and patriarchy and everything does not mean that everything I say is golden. Like, you don't have to just take it all in. And I think that's one of the big problems that's happening right now, that people are feeling this pressure that just anything that anyone says from an underprivileged community, you just have to take as gold. And like, you have to validate their experiences. Yes. But like, you don't have to just not ask any questions at all.
Well, and I would say the opposite is true, that you can't broad brush all men are the same, or that just because they're a man, it's just the opposite of what you just said. So just because they're a suppressed group of people doesn't mean they're always right. And just because they're a powerful group of people doesn't mean they're always wrong. I mean, that's like stating the obvious, but it sometimes needs to be said. So I think sometimes we get, and I've run into this, and I know this is like, wah, Mr. Powerful White Privilege. I mean, you own the world. Shut the fuck up. But I have felt broad brushed many times in the last year, with kind of this surge of anti-male rhetoric.
Yeah.
And boy, if you even start to call that out, you're going to get tarred and feathered. Really.
You are. Yeah. It's really complicated, Cass. Like, it's super complicated because we're all coming, and we talked about this yesterday. We're all coming to terms with patriarchy, with racism, with systems of oppression. Like myself, I'm coming to terms with that in the last couple of years. And I get angrier and angrier the more I understand the history of what's happened, what I've been taught, all this shit, and I get angry. And it's very challenging to maintain a voice that is articulate and fair. I don't know if that's the word I want to use, but like, there seems to be two ways to go with that. You can be hugely pissed off and just angry at the world and just struggle to articulate when you talk to, white men about these systems, especially when white men don't understand it. They don't have personal experiences with it. And that can just aggravate you more. And it can just result in what you're talking about. And then there's the other, I think, possibility where you're super, super pissed also, but you find it in you to find the words to try to talk to men about it. Because I think my opinion is yes to everything that's happening. Yes to Me Too. Yes to raising all of our voices. And also, someone needs to talk about the white men, like, because there's a lot of you guys out there who are like, oh my God, this is so fucked up what's happening and I don't understand it. Like, I know I'm a part of it and I don't know how I can help. And I feel like anything that I do is going to piss you guys off, but I really, really want to help and I don't know what to do. And it puts you in this position that can leave you hopeless, possibly even transforming into just frustrated and angry because it makes you feel like there's nothing you can do that's good enough. And that's also, I think, a valid position that men are not going to get a lot of pity for. That's fair. And at the same time, I think people, at least for me, I feel like I want to put energy into talking to white men about this, because I think they can stand to be our strongest advocates. And to do that, those of us who can should do our best to try to talk to them and share our stories and educate as much as possible.
Well, and as far as the man feeling like, oh, there's nothing I can do, I think that's almost part and parcel to it'd be like I had a tantrum and I threw my fist through the drywall of my house, and then I come back into the house and say, I'd like to fix this.
Yeah.
And my wife saying, no, you're not going to fix anything. Get the fuck out. And I'll hire a handyman to come fix this or something. Or a woman.
Right. A handy person.
But so I hear you. And I think you're dead on as far as like the emotions. The emotions are some of the disconnect because a person, whether it's white or gay or straight or male, female, all of these tensions, like even when you explained to me how that woman became a token on that podcast, I was like, wow, like my eyes were open to that.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of things that my eyes have been open to in the last year as far as how that was just the plight of women in America for the last 200 years.
Yeah.
And so there is, like, for example, a woman is trying to approach a man to say enough's enough, or, time's up, or something, to where she's drawing a boundary. And guess what? She's emotional because it's been hell and hard for decades. And so it would not be, it's not right or mature or brave for the man to say, you calm down, I'll listen to you when you're calm.
Yep.
I just have to go, oh, the emotion is part of the conversation.
Yep.
I don't know.
And that's where I think that there's a huge opportunity for those who are being spoken to about these situations to explore what it is to, like, what do you need to own from their reaction, from their feelings? Because I think part of the discomfort of, and we're just using the example of white men with women, for example, but we know that there's a lot of different dynamics going on. But part of the discomfort is what they assume is like a guilt. Like, I'm feeling the guilt of all men at all times, from 200 years back in America doing whatever they were doing to back in, Bible times where we had rapes just happening left and right, and God never said anything about it in the Bible. Like, and then just feeling all this guilt, and you're just looking at this woman like, I didn't do any of this. I'm here with you, and I'm here to try to help you. Please don't put all of this on me. And it puts you on the defensive, and it makes you less of a helpful partner in that conversation. And I think it's a valid and understandable and human response to it. But I think there's also then, once you recognize that, the opportunity to explore what it is to what you need to own. Like, it's okay to say that you're a part of it. It's okay to say, more than okay. Like,
it's almost necessary.
Yeah, it's necessary to say, I understand that I'm part of the system, and I understand that I still have behaviors that contribute to it, and acknowledging that, and then acknowledging their experience. And perhaps even part of it is knowing that you can't fucking fix it.
Yeah.
Like, maybe there's some things within your own individual dynamic that you want to talk about, but in general, like, you can't fucking fix this. This is bigger than you, and I need you to stop acting like you're supposed to fix it.
Right. I know this is not what the word means to the show, but the word agnostic is I don't know. And I think that curiosity is such a virtue here, because I've been around, I'm 52, so I've been around a long time. I've heard this argument around and round and round, and it goes like this. Well, the Native Americans, well, I wasn't there. So the fact that you're still bringing that up is reverse racism, and you're keeping the wound open, et cetera, et cetera. But a curious person, especially that's coming from the place of power, if they will say, wow, I can see that that's still bothering you, be curious as to like, what can we do to make this right? There is a sense of justice. Now, I'm not a fan of the pursuit of justice. I think it's futile. I think it's bullshit. And there is no justice on this earth. And the sooner that you surrender that to that truth, then the sooner that you become less entitled, you become tough-skinned, and you just get on with the breathing in and out in life because you're not waiting on justice. You're not looking for justice. Now, that's an extreme version, because here's what I'm also saying is that demographic, yeah, they weren't there. I wasn't there. We're talking about our great-grandfathers and mothers, and they're the ones that fucked up the treaties with the Native American people, et cetera, et cetera. But there's still something, there's a wound, there's something that is not served that could be served in the form of justice. Yeah, it's never going to be made right, never going to go away. We're never even going to forget it. The sting is never going to go away. So what can we do? What is it that we can do to heal this relationship, or at least take the relationship to a place where it's much more mature and much more healthy? And I think that begins with curiosity on the part of the powerful.
Yeah, because I think what sticks out to me in this conversation so far is that it's not over.
Yeah.
In so much as First Nations people who were here before us, it's not that it just happened and that it's over and now everybody has equal opportunity in the USA, and that they're complaining because they don't want it to be called the USA, even though they have everything that we have. And why don't they just let it go? They can't let it go because it's still fucking affecting them. They have been fucked over left and right today, like fucking today. And so when people, and I relate to that. I used to feel that way too about racism and stuff. I was like, I wasn't there. Like, I didn't do any of this stuff to you. Like, I don't understand why you're asking me to do anything. But and I don't know, that's maybe a different argument to explore. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's still fucking happening. Like, there's this huge denial of racism going on, and it's institutionalized, it's systemized. And it's today. So they're not asking for, yes, they're asking for past
reparations.
Reparations, thank you. I was going to say compensation, but it doesn't sound right. But they're asking about now. They're saying now I'm being treated like shit. Now I don't have equal opportunity. Now I have more risk of being pulled over and more risk of being seen as violent and being shot by the people who are supposed to protect me. This is now. But anyway, this is a huge tangent. But
no,
sorry about that. I interrupted you.
We ended up out here on this tangent, and that's just how it happens.
We did.
While you were talking, I just picture the desire or the need for those in power to roll out, getting back to the word token. We found this Native American who's a lawyer and has, a mansion or whatever, he's attained the American dream in spite of his indigenous or, ethnicity. And see, roll them out and parade them around as if, it can be done. And it's such a way for the powerful to like feel good about themselves and hide behind the one success story. I don't know. Just a thought.
I know they're trying to evaluate things honestly. I don't think anyone is actually at least most people aren't trying to be an asshole. And so that's why I think, like you said, curiosity is good, and hopefully curiosity leads you to ask questions, but not to your fucking person of color next door. Leave them the fuck alone. Like, not every person of color wants to talk about race with you. Leave them alone. Stop asking them fucking questions.
Read a book?
Unless they yes, read a fucking book, because some person of color or somebody from the LGBTQIA plus community wrote a fucking book because they had the emotional energy to put that together for you. So go read that fucking book and leave your fucking neighbor alone. It is not their responsibility to explain this to you. A lot of us still aren't even able to articulate the oppression that we're under because we're still in it, because it's so pervasive. But read a fucking book, listen to a goddamn podcast, learn about your trans people from trans people who are talking about it. And leave your goddamn neighbor alone.
Well, how do you really feel about it? All right, we're going to wrap it up, but I wanted to just, we had a tragedy, at least in our minds, a tragedy. I shouldn't set it up like that because it's
Who died?
Right. I love the satire comic Betty Bowers, who does video memes and just wonderful short clips and sketches that are hilarious. And when you started booking guests for me, I said, hey, if you can track down Betty Bowers, I'd love to have her on the show.
Yeah, and I was okay, hold on. Let me book Ricky Gervais real quick, and then I'll go get her.
Yeah. Well, she turns out to be a he. She's an actress, but the mastermind behind it is a guy, and you found him, and he really doesn't do interviews. He's very modest. Like, he's like, why would you want to talk to me? And
yeah.
We kind of, I don't know, we lucked out, and he said, okay, it sounds great, I'll do it. And we got like a 20-minute talk with him, and it was great, and it was wonderful. I couldn't wait to get it out. And you even like advertised, hey, we just taped an interview with this guy, and he's the mind behind Betty Bowers. And so that's coming out. Well, then, because we were using a software that we'd never used before, we made a mistake closing out, and his track, right? I think, everybody's track.
Yeah.
We, for whatever reason, it was about a 30-minute taping, and the track that I got in the download was three or 4 minutes long. And so we got the first 3 or 4 minutes, and then it just, stopped. And so it's one of those things when your computer turns off in the middle of having written a Word doc, that before Microsoft had autosave, and you're like, no, I've got to start that paper over. And, he wasn't willing to tape again. Actually, we didn't even, I think we did ask him, but I don't know. I didn't want to impose on him.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just wanted to say that and also just promote, Betty Bowers. If you haven't seen her, just YouTube it. It's amazing. In fact, let's play a clip.
Americans just love to talk to Jesus. They'd also listen to him, but they don't like to be interrupted. In fact, Christians are so unlikely to do anything Jesus asked. The New Testament is history's most successful exercise in reverse psychology. Example, Jesus said, don't pray in front of other people. So we pray in front of thousands of them with megawatt amplification and a brass band cue to amen. The only thing Americans ignore more than Jesus is their waistlines. You know what makes Jesus resent the crucifixion? You! Because he told you to give everything you own to the poor. Of course, he was poor. To which rich Americans responded, you knew I didn't like to be red orders, but I would like to order a new red Porsche. After all, if we give all our money to the poor, they'd be rich and we'd be poor, so we'd have to give it all right back to us. We just save a step and keep it. Trust me, you can't be both capitalist and Christian if you don't have the stones to outsmart Commie Christ. Quick, what's Jesus' rule if you're attacked? Don't attack back. He must think we're French. Yes, we promise no retaliation. We'll just attack first. Let's face it, we bought trillions of weapons instead of healthcare, education, bridges, baby formula. It would be such a shame to let our deep, unshakable, religious faith get in the way of dropping a few bombs. Boom. Because being a Christian warmonger is really like being a polite rapist. Here's a biggie. Jesus told his followers not to go around giving unsolicited critiques. Frankly, it's an odd criticism coming from the only person I know who's set aside a whole day for it. Never trust a God who doesn't lead by example. So judging may make us bad Christians, but it also makes us more Christ-like, because with American Christians, every day is Judgment Day. And I'm starting with that belt. Go ahead. Ask any Republican, what's the only thing better than more? even more. But Jesus said it is harder for a rich person to pass through the pearly gates than it is to cram a camel through the eye of a needle. Messy. Clearly, you have to break a few camels to make a Camelot. For all the talk in America about marriage, you'd think Jesus said a lot about it. He didn't. Other than don't divorce and in heaven we spell remarriage adultery. Congratulations, America. Are you trying to make Jesus cry? Because Christians are more likely to divorce than atheists, which technically makes atheists better Christians than Christians. You know, if you find you never do anything your God asks, maybe you picked the wrong one.
Yeah, he was really good to talk to. It was really interesting to hear him because it sounded like he was never religious, right?
Yeah, he wasn't mad at religion. In fact, he was very amicable with like the religious people in his life that are nice people. He's just speaking truth to power and pushing against theocracy.
Right.
He has no qualms with it. Yeah, I thought he was a refreshing person.
Yeah. And I thought it was really interesting because he doesn't even live in the same place as his actress.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'll write out these scripts and then she'll get herself taped in some studio and send the video clips back to him. And then he'll do all the editing, I think is what he said.
Yeah, green screen or something.
Yeah.
So
I thought that was cool.
Not only has he not been religious, but he's in LA or something. I mean, he doesn't live in an environment where it is, Christian oppression or Christian dominance. It's mostly just what he reads, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. It's what's happening in the nation. Yeah. And that was interesting too. That he talked about like how he usually tries to hide any like bad comments from his actress because like he doesn't want her to feel bad. Like I think he said he's gotten like death threats and stuff too. Yeah. Anyway,
check out Betty Bowers. What was his name? Do you remember?
His name is Andrew Bradley.
Yeah.
And I think he's starting to get more comfortable with putting his voice out there in front of Betty Bowers because I think he's realized how much it means to non-believing communities or formerly believing communities. I think he talked about one opportunity he had recently to speak to a humanist group, and he just found that to be so emotionally fulfilling for people, that this thing that he made for people was so valued and to be able to have that interaction with the community. And I think that, so we caught him at the right time where we're like, yeah, we have a podcast that gets about 1,300 downloads per episode. Do you want to be on it? He's like, sure. So we got super lucky on getting him on the podcast and then just had recording errors. And so it sucks, but he was a great person. And like you said, I definitely recommend to go check out his videos with Mrs. Betty Bowers.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I got to go. You got to go. Good to talk.
Yep. We got to go.
Peace out.
See ya.
So that's my conversation with Marie. You perceptive, intuitive types can hear how much that I have yet to learn and how much Marie is going to teach me. This is invaluable to me. I'm not kidding around. I mean it. I value that, and I feel I should be paying her a tutor's honorarium. I look forward to the opportunity we have, Marie and I, to sharpen and hone these skills together. I know her to be extremely mature, especially for her age. In fact, I suspect her emotional maturity exceeds mine, even though I'm 16 years older than her. That's our show for this week. We appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks.